everyone. Thanks for joining us on Mom Squad. I'm Maureen Kyle. Today's parenting topic has more to do with your wallet. We're talking food waste, and I'm sure it happens in your home. It's very frustrating to see expensive groceries get thrown into the garbage. According to the organization Feeding America, people in the United States waste 80 million tons of food every year. That equals 149 billion meals, and those meals end up in landfills. We throw away $444 billion worth of food every year. And 38% of all food goes unsold or uneaten. When we are aware of this, we can do better. In a few minutes, we're going to talk to a lifestyle expert on how she saves money and reduces waste. But first, Jenny Dean from our Tampa station goes in depth about food waste and how it impacts your budget.
Let's start to figure out what we're throwing away and what we're not eating, what we don't eat in time, and then start cutting back that way. And then when you go to the grocery store, number one thing is don't shop hungry. Come with a meal plan, know what you're going to eat that week.
Freeze any extra fresh produce you have to use later in healthy smoothies, and learn the difference between food waste and wasted food.
The wasted food is all those vegetables you bought that you didn't eat in time, and there's the food waste, little bits of scraps of banana peels that you can't eat, but you can compost.
Keep in mind, food is the single largest category of material going into our landfills, producing powerful greenhouse gases like methane. So really think before you throw.
And by throwing food away, you're really just throwing money away. So especially now with food prices going up and budgets are just a little bit more tighter, it's important that we try to maximize our food.
So make that grocery list. Also, composting, as we mentioned there, great option for all of your food scraps like banana peels, potato peels, and coffee grounds. Also, you can use it in your home garden and save on fertilizer costs as well.
So this is something pretty much every household struggles with. Joining me today, my co-host, fellow mom, and executive producer, Jenny Jordan. When you look in your fridge, what is it that always goes rotten before you can eat it?
The bag salad.
Yes.
The bag salad. I feel like that's definitely on the list. Bananas in my house are so hit and miss.
Yes.
It would be like, we'll go through a bunch of bananas in 3 days and we're like, okay, we need more bananas. Yeah. And then it's like, oh no, we're not eating them, we're tired, Yeah. And so, but those bananas, at least I can use a lot, as they
like banana bread.
Banana bread.
Just made it the other
banana
day.
Muffins. I make those all the time. You could freeze them for the smoothies and stuff. So that at least I don't feel too bad about. But it's a lot of times it's like an unopened bag. So I bought this thinking this is what I needed.
Right.
And I never even use it.
You know what? It's funny how many memes do we see out there about like, I can't wait to buy that, mixed greens only to see it go rotten. And those are the things that do go fast. And it's the produce, which is sad. We have a lot of solutions to it. Right. But I don't know about you, I've also gone in and looked at there's something I bought that is like canned or a sauce or something or a salad dressing where it just sits in the fridge forever. Yeah. And then I look at it and I go, well, this went bad a couple months ago. And I worry about, well, should I be eating this or should I not? Another big thing in our house is the deli meats, because
I was just gonna say that.
I buy them for the kids' school lunches, and of course I buy in bulk because we're gonna be making lunches over the next 2 weeks, and buying in bulk, it is cheaper when you compare the price of what I get at the big, the wholesale clubs versus what I can get at a grocery store deli. You do get more, but then sometimes we go through all of that turkey, and then sometimes I'm like, well, is this slimy? Does it smell funny? Like, how do I tell? And I end up certain weeks, I end up throwing a lot of that out.
Yes, and I feel bad now that you're saying this because I do that. I'll be like, well, it's a little too slimy. Then I'm like, I guess it goes to the dog now. I don't know.
You give it to the dog. Oh gosh.
Like, maybe it's too slimy for them. They probably shouldn't do that.
Right. You might end up with a sick dog.
Doggy.
And it's those leftovers too. Where I think it's a great idea to go, especially in the summer months. I go out and I grill a whole bunch of chicken, and not the cheap chicken. It's the skinless, boneless chicken. And then a few days later, I'm thinking to myself, is this still okay to eat? And so I'm Googling, and I don't know. I feel like all of the Food and Drug Administration recommends And it's usually like, ooh, I better play it safe. This is borderline.
Well, and like our experts today in the story you just heard, the one that coming up, I think, they both said, like, go in with the grocery store with a plan. Have what you want to eat, you know, and have that. But I think that might be what my problem is. I don't know what I'm going to want to eat in 2 days. I might have a craving for something, and I guarantee you that craving isn't salad. So, you know, I think that sometimes it's like, you got to have, you know, the things that you have all the time, but then either you plan and you really commit to it and you say, no, this is, you know, this is it. This is what we're eating. Or you go to the grocery store a lot more often. And I do find that when I have that luxury, that I don't waste as much food. If I could go to the store, I cook at home more because I'm like, oh, but who has time? I mean,
who has time? This is something actually that we will go and a little bit more in depth to. So we had a chance to talk with Trae Bodge, a nationally renowned smart shopping expert who has some advice on how she finds great deals on groceries and how she reduces waste at home. So Trae, thanks so much for being with us to talk about food waste, a big topic in a lot of households. So what do you think is the biggest issue when it comes to food waste within our households?
I think it's lack of planning. You know, and we often go to the grocery store and our eyes are bigger than our menus, and we end up overbuying and then underutilizing the food that we already have.
I am guilty of this, where I always get the same exact things. Like I just out of habit, I know I go down this aisle and I get these things, and then certain weeks that stuff gets used, certain other weeks it doesn't. What do you recommend when it comes to planning? Where should our mindset be?
So I think there is a slight danger with buying the same thing every week, because what happens is at home, people get bored, right? You have that favorite yogurt that everyone loves, and then suddenly no one eats it because we're all bored of it, right? So I think it's good to mix things up a little bit. And a good way to do that is to save money as you're shopping. Definitely browse those circulars. Maybe it'll inspire a recipe that you've wanted to try. Or there's a new app that I really love called Flash Food that partners with different grocery stores around the country and helps them avoid food waste by selling through their items that are close to their best buy date or in surplus. And you as the consumer can save up to 50% that way just by ordering through the Flash Food app and then picking up at your grocery store. So that's a fun way to save a lot of money and then mix things up at home so you don't have that boredom effect.
Oh my goodness. So that lists their specials and like what's on sale?
Yes. And so that's a really good way to avoid food waste for the grocery store as well. So it's a win-win for us. We save money and then avoid food waste. So I love that approach.
Yeah. And I think that's where it hurts the most is when we see food going into the garbage. Yes, it's disappointing. But when we think about how much money that is wasting, how much money are we talking about in our household budget?
I don't know how much money exactly, but what I will say is from a recent study, 40% of food is wasted in this country, and that is just a colossal amount. Now, some of that, of course, is due to what's going on at restaurants, and we can't help that as consumers, but what we can help is what we're doing at home and trying to avoid food waste in our own small world.
Yeah, and I'm sure the household budget depends on the family and how much money you're spending on what certain groceries. Any tips on how to plan even better and look at that menu? Is it a portion size thing? Is it an ingredients thing? What do you think?
Yeah, so there are a couple things here. I think it is important to think about portions. How many people are you feeding? How much does each person eat? Sometimes we go to, say, a wholesale club like a Costco or a BJ's, Sam's Club, and we're so excited to buy the giant tub of microgreens, for example, and everybody loves it for a couple days. And then, of course, you have that boredom. And then half of that item goes to waste. So here's what I recommend if you are going to buy in bulk, and this is a very good approach. Just focus on the things that are non-perishable. So pastas, canned goods, things like that you can buy in bulk. You have them in your pantry, which is great. So you can mix up that menu and keep things exciting at home. But don't buy those things that are perishable at the wholesale club unless you're feeding a lot of people every day and you're sure that you're going to work through all those items.
Yeah. And one of the things I did read about food waste is that people are very confused about the expiration dates. the best by and then use by. Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, I've heard a lot about this as well and read a lot about this. And of course, I wonder about this in my own home. What I've found is that there is a best by date, and that is certainly a recommendation for when you ideally should cook that food and serve that food. But if you are past that best by date by a few days or a week and the product smells okay, looks okay, you should be okay. Often let your nose be the guide, or if something looks weird inside the container, definitely throw that away. But those best by dates are just a guide. It is not a hard, fast rule.
Mm-hmm. You have a website full of smart shopping ideas. When it comes to food and groceries, I mean, you've given us a couple of tips with flash food and what to buy in bulk, but any other advice for people who are trying to slash that grocery budget? Because that's what's really been hurting with inflation prices. We've seen them fluctuate. Any other smarter ways to shop that you've discovered?
Yeah, so food prices are still high. Now, obviously, our economy is doing better. Inflation is doing better, but we are seeing an inflation still in food prices. It's 25% up in the past 4 years, which outpaces inflation by 19%. So food cost is a huge, huge problem. So a couple things here. Just, of course, plan your menus. I would recommend, buying in bulk only in certain things, maybe taking a couple extra trips during the week to get those smaller things to kind of spice up your menu. Something else that I like to do is to use deal sites to look for deals on my grocery shopping. Coupon Cabin is the one that I like because they have lots of offers that you can use to save with Fresh Direct, for example, or Instacart. So go to couponcabin.com and search groceries, and you'll find some ways to save there. So that's something that I like. A couple other tips here. I also like to buy in season versus out of season. Yes, you may be craving that certain ingredient, but you're really going to pay for that if something's out of season. And then lastly, try to avoid buying pre-chopped foods. Yes, it's convenient, especially if, of course, if you're having your Super Bowl party, for example, but you're paying for that labor to have those items prepared. Maybe you have a couple able-bodied kids at home that can help you with the chopping and the prep. That will save you a lot of money as well.
Yeah, we got to get those kids doing some chores.
Yes.
Leftovers too. That seems to be a big source of food waste. And everybody out there can relate because you've made a big meal, then you have these leftovers, or maybe you've gone out to eat. Any advice on how to use those leftovers or utilize the leftover food?
Yeah, so leftovers are a huge problem. I actually love leftovers. I'm kind of excited the next day to have that same meal or half of my dinner that I saved from a restaurant. So I don't mind leftovers, but a couple things here. So if you're going to make a really huge batch of chili, for example, and you think, okay, I think everyone's going to want to eat this for 2 more days, take a look at your portion. If you have a lot there, I would freeze that amount. And this is really important too when it comes to freezing. Put it in a container where you can then indicate, say, in a grease pencil or write in a marker on a piece of tape the date, and organize your freezer accordingly, because a lot of food waste also comes from things going bad in the freezer. So you get that frostbite on the food and it doesn't taste great, it doesn't look great. So make sure to organize your freezer regularly, put those dates on there so you can cycle through that food. But that way, if you save that chili and maybe defrost it a couple weeks later, everyone's excited to have it again.
Yeah. With your deal sites, anything that you have found when it comes to restaurants too, because we go and life happens, we have to go to a restaurant or we just want to indulge. And then restaurant food waste is one of the biggest culprits.
Yes, for sure. And expensive as well. Mm-hmm. Restaurants have become very, very expensive. So look for ways to save on restaurants. Look at your local listserv, for example, on your Facebook group. If a restaurant is having a sale, often in our local calendar here in New Jersey, that restaurants have little coupons at the bottom. So I always look at that. So that's something to think about. But in terms of food waste, be really mindful of how everyone is ordering at the restaurant. Sometimes, you look at the menu and you want literally everything. Only do that if you know that you're going to pack everything up, bring it home, and then, maybe prepare lunches for the kids to take to school the next day, lunch for yourself, for example, if you work from home, or leftovers the night before. Really think about that. Like, be careful of that kind of like your eyes are bigger than your menu or your belly, and order accordingly.
Right. I know. We've all been there. We've all done it. Trae, thank you so much. This is such great advice. I love those sites that you've mentioned. We're going to have to check them out. And of course, most importantly, save some money.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
So there you heard Trae Bodge talking about, going more often, which that's a matter of resources. Is your time worth saving that extra money? Because for a lot of people, it might be. Like if you're really feeling guilty about throwing out all of that extra food, or you're thinking, well, great, my kids didn't eat that, or I didn't eat the leftover.
Right.
If you are going more often, that might help your bank account, which when you're pinching pennies will help.
And it does help too. I found another, not so much for food waste, but for saving money, was if I do the deliveries, because then I'm not doing those impulse buys.
True.
But that would also help with food waste too, because then I'm just buying what I need and how much I need it. Although, it depends on the delivery system. Sometimes I end up with I don't know what.
Yeah.
And then that gets wasted because they send in the craziest substitutions.
Right. I've got,
You've seen them online, yeah.
Sometimes I end up with the produce that I wouldn't have picked, and I don't know.
Yeah.
That's working all of that out. So she also talked about flash foods, which I personally haven't used. I've heard about it. Jenny, you use flash foods all the time. So what do you think of this app?
So it's really easy to use. So I just thought okay, let's look right now. And so I went on to a local grocery store near us here, and the funny thing is there's a lot of stuff, but a lot of stuff is Best Buy today. And it's a lot of breads and bakery things and coleslaw, chicken salad.
Yeah.
And so, hey, if you need dinner for tonight, fantastic.
Right.
Outside of that, I'm not sure it's going to work that great. Almost everything on here for this particular store, now there's all different things, is pretty soon. Now there's deli meat that we talked about, and it's Best By February 28th. So by the time this airs, it'll probably be, that won't make any sense, but it's a couple weeks, you know.
So wait,
a week at least.
Best Buy, it definitely says Best Buy.
It tells you when this food is.
So I wonder if
that's the thing.
Because there's Best Buy and then there's Use By.
True.
So like bread, if there's a Best Buy date of today, I'd be comfortable using that bread.
Sure.
But if there's Best Buy chicken salad, that's where I'm wondering, and that's where you use the sniff tests and all of that. But then again, I don't know. Those are the things that make me nervous.
Right.
But that's where I could see, like a cheese or a hummus Best Buy, as we've talked about that. That's not a use by date.
Right.
So, I mean, but that can be helpful for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a great idea, especially if you're just looking for a meal that day, or what am I going to feed the kids instead of picking something else up, Well, and I don't think you could do your whole grocery list on that, though.
I mean, we also admit it. Raise your hand if you spend a lot of time on other deal sites, for clothing and shoes. Why not put that into your repertoire so that maybe, hey, there's a great deal on bread and I've been eating bread, or let me go grab this now. You can always freeze it, and then there you go. You've saved a few pennies.
Yes.
So, do you compost?
I don't. I know you are very good at that. Well,
it's a debate in my household.
Yes, no, I don't, unfortunately.
So my mom had always, I grew up with a composting mother, where it was, the produce food scraps would go into a composting bin, and then she'd use this. Now I've done it over the past few years. My husband, he doesn't love the compost in the backyard, but really, now we've heard, he came home to me, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, and he said, he thinks the younger people in his office, he's talking about how they are paying $50 a month for a service to come pick up their food scraps that qualify as composting, and then they can also pay $50 for a pile of the dirt that it turns into. But I was laughing because composting can be free. And composting can also actually be a great way to help the planet get something good out of all that produce that's going bad. Allison Gormley from our station in Indianapolis takes us through the very easy process.
The composting process is a lot like cooking a dinner. And the first step is gathering the ingredients.
Eggshells, onion skins, kale stems. There's coffee grounds to put those in.
That's where Cece and John Crone help out.
We've been composting about two and a half years.
Instead of tossing their food waste into the trash, they pay for a bi-weekly pickup.
Yeah, this bag is made of cornstarch.
That way, the materials break down somewhere else.
I've just always kind of felt that I didn't want to be wasteful because the earth is precious to me.
The company Green with Indy hauls it off for $20 a month after a $65 startup fee.
Padich is my first customer.
Greg Walton started the service with just an SUV. Now, between homes and restaurants, he needs a trailer.
So this is a good smelling day. Those are coffee grounds with their coffee filters. The coffee filters are paper, and you can break those down as well.
But sweet smelling isn't always the case. After Walton runs his routes, picking everything up from produce to cardboard to dryer lint, he takes the compost ingredients to Green Cycle. That's where they're mixed with materials to help break it down.
We've done this for so long, we know that green and brown together kills the odor and helps the microbial action. So what they'll do is they'll dump all this, we'll inspect it, and then we'll mix it with the leaves that are coming in.
John Repenning is one of the owners. He said the piles are stacked high to increase the temperature to around 140 degrees. That way, the compost cooks down.
We're taking what would be a waste and turning it into a commodity. Otherwise, it would go in a landfill and we'd never use it again.
And like the Crohn's dinner recipe, the materials are mixed every so often and simmer. Except in this case, the pile is mixed once a month and simmers for a year. After one final check for contaminants, the final product is ready to serve to customers.
This is pure compost.
Right, so this is pure compost, but if you pick this up right now, it just smells like nice dirt.
Yeah, it has no odor.
Composted and ready to go back in the garden.
And I mean, is there a social component for you, getting what came from the earth back into the earth?
Oh, absolutely. It's the best job you could have. You can make a living and do the right thing.
Composting, super easy. I mean, it's really about learning which items can be composted and which ones would ruin your compost pile. I gotta admit, my mom, she's moms are great, right? That's why we're here. She even just gave up on like the bin, and she started just digging a hole in her garden and like putting the scraps in there and then covering it back up. Obviously, what you need to think about is if that place in your yard or your garden, if critters can easily get to it, if they'd be digging it up, if you have a dog that would be digging for scraps, all of that. So, I mean, personally, I would say having an actual bin helps. But I remember even talking to a neighbor that she says she puts compost within all of, like every spring in her garden, she puts a layer of compost over her plants. And she said, I had the most beautiful flowers every year that we used compost.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
And I mean, more power to your mom.
Right.
For that. But I will say though, as we talk about it, I have seen more and more, like it's getting friendlier. It doesn't have to be the big stinky bin in the back of your yard anymore, and you don't have to put a hole in the ground.
Right.
But I've seen like these little tinier ones that are just like right by the kitchen sink, and then you can use that and either transfer it, or maybe you're just saying, you know what, I can't know what to do and what doesn't compost, so I'm just going to go with the very basics and create that small thing, because we all need to do a little bit of part to go green, you know?
There are appliance companies, I'm not going to name names because nobody is a sponsor here, but there are appliance companies that have created countertop compost bins where they say, you know, you throw the banana peel in there and then it grinds it up and it makes the process go faster, so you'd get soil a lot faster. But if you think about it, like let's think about just food waste in general here. So you have that banana peel, you have the orange peel, you have the broccoli that's starting to look a little, you know, like getting some fuzz on there or something. You compost it, it becomes dirt. Like I've also paid for bags of garden soil, you know?
Yes.
And it's, the things, as you heard in that story, it shouldn't smell. So if it's smelling, then there's something in there that shouldn't have gone in there. You're not putting like meat or any of those type of scraps in there. But, you know, this is something that can help reduce emissions, globally. It can, you know, you're doing something good with the food that didn't quite make it. And like all the wrinkly blueberries that I have in my fridge that could be going toward a more beautiful garden. I think
poor green pepper.
The poor pepper that is just
getting a
little wrinkly. You know, and then there's other ways. If you're really interested in how to use some of the foods you don't think of to use, like I mentioned broccoli right now, so this is what I'm thinking of. In doing some of this research, I found, you know, some girl who, I think it was a vegan website that posted her Instagram story about using the broccoli stems for broccoli tots, like shredding the broccoli stems. Now, when I was growing up, my mom always cooked the broccoli stems, and so we would get a flowerette, and then we would get a stem too, because she did not waste anything. But there's parts of the, you know, what parts of these produce items are we not using and that we could utilize that wouldn't go into a landfill, that we would get our full money's worth? That's another side dish that we didn't think of that we could use.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to try the broccoli stem tots. I don't know if my kids
I'm going to make them
fly,
for you.
but maybe I would try. My kids, I don't know. Yeah. Everything, it gets no matter what it is. Do I like that? And I'm always like, you do. You love it last time.
Yeah.
But I do juice a lot, or not a lot, more I need to. Yeah. But and I do feel like that's where I love to get rid of like some of our old produce, the fruits that kind of are going bad too. So that's another one I think they talked about.
Yeah, like throwing things, like if it is starting to go bad, those wrinkly blueberries that I've talked about. I'll have to take video when I go home that you can, you know, freeze them or put, you know, I've seen like put some of this produce in water to see if it bounces back.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I don't know about blueberries, but I've definitely done that with greens.
Green onions, yeah.
Yeah, greens like lettuce too, kale. When it starts to wilt, you put it in there, see if it bounces back. Okay. So yeah. Yeah.
Hey, even though you're wrinkly, you're still good.
Right.
And that's one for another day. That's when we have the dermatologist.
Yeah. Let's see how much water improves our own wrinkles. But well, hopefully you found this helpful, especially when we talk about money, saving money. Who can't use a little extra cash in their wallet, right? And we want to make sure that we're preserving our planet and getting the best we can out of what we've already purchased. So thank you to all of our experts who helped with all of this information and helped make our lives a little bit easier. Thank you, Jenny, for especially with your app that you helped with. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. We'll see you right back here next time on Mom Squad.